Story 1. Hitchhiker's Haven. I had been hitchhiking for months, making my way across the country with little more than my backpack and a pocket full of loose change. Most nights, I'd crash in the back of someone's truck or find a secluded spot to camp. But that evening was different. A storm rolled in just before sunset, and the rain came down in relentless sheets. By the time I reached a desolate stretch of mountain road, I was soaked to the bone, shivering, and desperate for shelter. That's when I saw headlights. A beat-up station wagon pulled over, and the driver rolled down the window. A balding man with thick glasses and a tired smile. He introduced himself as Dave and offered me a ride into town. I hesitated, but the rain left me little choice. I climbed in, my wet clothes squelching against the seat. Dave seemed friendly enough at first, chatting about the weather and asking where I was headed. I told him I wasn't sure, just following the road, and he chuckled. "You're in luck," he said. "There's a little motel a few miles ahead. Cozy place, perfect for a night like this." When we pulled up, I immediately regretted getting in his car. The motel was a single-story building with flickering neon lights spelling vacancy. The paint was peeling, the parking lot was cracked, and half the windows were boarded up. It looked like the kind of place where bad things happened. But the storm was relentless, and I had nowhere else to go. Dave insisted on going in with me to help me get settled. The man at the counter, a wiry, gray-haired guy with a pencil-thin mustache, barely glanced at me as he slid a room key across the counter. "Room 3, he muttered. I didn't have to show ID or pay, which struck me as odd. Dave patted my shoulder and said, "Don't worry about it. You can thank me later. Just make sure you lock your door tonight." Something about his tone sent a shiver down my spine. The room was as depressing as the exterior. Stained carpet, a sagging bed, and a flickering light in the bathroom. The only heat came from a small, ancient radiator that barely worked. I dropped my backpack on the chair and peeled off my wet clothes, hanging them over the radiator to dry. Exhausted, I crawled into bed, too tired to care about the state of the sheets. That's when I heard the first noise. Footsteps outside the window. I froze, listening. They were slow and deliberate, circling the room. I told myself it was just the manager checking the property, but the sound didn't stop. When I finally worked up the courage to peek out, no one was there. I tried to sleep, but the sense of unease wouldn't leave me. Then, just as I was drifting off, there was a knock on the door. 3 sharp raps. My heart raced. "Who is it?" I called, my voice trembling. "It's Dave," came the reply. "Just wanted to make sure you're settled in." Every instinct screamed at me not to open the door. "I'm fine, thanks," I said, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. "Come on, open up," he insisted, his voice taking on an edge. "It's pouring out here." I stayed silent, clutching the pocket knife from my bag. After a few tense moments, the knocking stopped, and I heard his footsteps retreat. I breathed a sigh of relief, but my peace didn't last long. The power went out. The room plunged into darkness, and the heater died. I fumbled for my phone to use as a flashlight, but before I could turn it on, I heard the window rattle. Someone was trying to open it. Panic surged as I grabbed my bag and bolted for the bathroom. I locked the door and crouched in the tub, knife in hand, trying to steady my breathing. The rattling stopped, but moments later, I heard the sound of the front door creaking open. My blood ran cold. Whoever it was had gotten inside. Footsteps echoed through the room, heavy and deliberate. I could hear drawers being opened, furniture being moved. My hiding spot wouldn't last. Summoning every ounce of courage, I burst out of the bathroom, hoping to catch the intruder off guard. But the room was empty. The door hung ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. I bolted for the parking lot, rain soaking me as I ran. Dave's car was gone, and so was my backpack. My heart sank as I realized I'd left it in the room. Desperate, I pounded on the manager's office door, but there was no answer. The place was deserted. I stood there, shaking and soaked, unsure what to do. That's when a car pulled in, a sheriff's cruiser. Relief washed over me as I flagged it down. The deputy listened patiently as I explained what had happened. He frowned and said, "This place has been abandoned for years. No one's run it since the owner passed away." I tried to protest, but he cut me off. "We've had reports of squatters using it as a base. Sounds like you got caught up in their game." He offered to give me a ride to the next town, where I could file a report and call someone for help. As we drove away, I looked back at the motel, its dark silhouette barely visible in the rain. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd escaped something far worse than theft that night. Story 2. The Broken Down Beetle. It was supposed to be the road trip of a lifetime. Lila and I had been planning this for months, ever since I accepted a new job in Los Angeles. Rather than just jumping into work right away, I wanted to turn the journey into something memorable. A fun cross-country adventure with my best friend. We'd leave from Charlotte, North Carolina, and make stops at all the exciting places along the way. I had already shipped all my belongings ahead of time, so it was just us, a couple of backpacks, and my old beat-up VW Beetle. The car wasn't exactly ideal for a road trip of this magnitude, but it had never let me down before. So far, it had held up fine. We'd hit Nashville, danced on Broadway, and even stopped in Tulsa for some BBQ. Everything was going smoothly until we were halfway between Tulsa and Amarillo. That's when the Beetle started smoking. I pulled over to the side of the desolate back road, and we both got out to see what was wrong. Neither of us knew much about cars, but it didn't take an expert to figure out the issue. A hose was leaking oil all over the engine, and the smell of burning oil was overwhelming. We called the nearest towing company, but being in the middle of nowhere, they were overwhelmed and couldn't get to us until morning. It felt hopeless, until we noticed a small roadside motel just up the highway. Its neon vacancy sign flickered weakly, but at least it was a place to stay. We pushed the car into the parking lot and walked into the motel lobby. The place was just as run down as you'd expect. Faded wallpaper, dim lighting, and an old man at the front desk who looked far too excited to see us. He handed us a key to room 11 and grinned. "Enjoy your stay," he said, his smile lingering just a little too long. We walked outside and started looking for room 11. The main building only had rooms up to 10, but there was a small sign pointing to rooms 11 and 12 behind the main building. We followed the sign and found 2 additional rooms tucked away in what looked like a hastily added structure. It was isolated, dark, and creepy, but we didn't have any other options. Room 11 was just as bad as the rest of the motel. 2 twin beds, a small TV that didn't work, and a damp mildew smell. We grabbed some snacks from the vending machine and dipped our toes in the pool before calling it a night, trying to laugh it off as part of the adventure. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to a strange noise outside the door. Groggy and disoriented, I peered through the blinds and froze. There was a man outside our door, bolting a large 2x4 across the frame. My heart raced as I shook Lila awake. "Someone's barricading us in," I whispered. We both stared out the window as a truck pulled up, and 2 men began talking. One of them was the motel manager. "You got 2 of them in there?" one asked. "Yes, just like I told you." the manager replied. How old? Can't be more than 22, 23. That'll do. Let me grab the gas. Wait, the manager said. You promised $5,000 apiece. I want my money now. You'll get your money when we get them in the truck. Panicked, we began searching for a way out. The bathroom window was sealed shut, and the front door was now barricaded. Just when it felt hopeless, I noticed a connecting door behind one of the dressers. We shoved it aside and found the door unlocked. We stepped into the adjoining room and froze. The room was completely bare except for a metal dentist's chair in the center, equipped with straps. The walls were stark white, and a TV on a small table played static. It was like something out of a horror movie. Trying not to panic, we checked the bathroom window in this room. To our relief, it was open. We climbed out and sprinted into the desert behind the motel, the distant lights of a small town guiding us. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the town and found the local sheriff's station. We told him everything, and he immediately sent deputies to investigate. They found the torture room, but the manager was gone. The sheriff explained that human trafficking rings operated heavily in the area and that 2 young girls on a road trip were prime targets. He put us up in a nicer hotel and promised to get our car to a local mechanic. The next morning, we found the Beetle parked in the hotel lot with a note taped to the windshield. Better ditch this clunker before you wind up in trouble again. We took the advice. We left the Beetle at a junkyard and booked a flight to Los Angeles. The road trip didn't turn out the way we planned, but we were lucky to escape with our lives. It's an adventure we'll never forget, but one we'll never want to relive. Story 3. The Owner's Son. We were on a family trip to the Smoky Mountains, one my dad had meticulously planned for months. He loved finding bargains, so instead of staying in town like most families, he booked us a room at a motel a bit up the mountain. It was cheaper, and according to him, it's got better views and saves us a fortune. To his credit, when we pulled up, the place didn't look half bad. It had clearly been renovated. New paint, clean exterior, a fresh-looking sign. The manager, a wiry man in his 50s with a permanent frown etched into his face, greeted us as we checked in. He handed my dad the room key and then called out to someone in the back, "Jacob, help these folks with their bags." Jacob shuffled into view, a tall, gangly young man with messy dark hair that hung over his eyes. He looked to be in his late teens, maybe early 20s. He barely made eye contact with us, mumbled something under his breath, and started grabbing our luggage. My dad thanked him enthusiastically, but Jacob didn't respond. He just nodded and led us toward our room. From the moment we got to our room, I could feel Jacob's eyes on me. It wasn't overt. He wasn't leering or anything, but there was something in the way he lingered, his gaze darting to me when he thought I wasn't looking. My mom tried to break the tension with polite small talk, but Jacob barely answered her. When we finally got inside and my dad handed him a tip, Jacob just stared at it for a moment before stuffing it into his pocket and walking away without a word. "That kid's a little off," my mom whispered once he was gone. My dad shrugged it off. "He's harmless, just shy." The first couple of days went by without much incident. We spent our time hiking, exploring local attractions, and enjoying the fresh mountain air. But every time we returned to the motel, Jacob was there, sitting on a bench near the entrance, leaning against the wall, or pretending to clean something nearby. He'd always perk up when he saw me, his awkwardness vanishing as he said hi and tried to strike up a conversation. At first, I just thought he was lonely, but it started to feel obsessive. One evening, we came back from a long day at a nearby national park, and as usual, Jacob was waiting near the entrance. This time, he wasn't even pretending to clean or do anything useful. He was just standing there, staring. When we passed him, he muttered, "Hi, Emma." My name. I hadn't told him my name. I didn't say anything, just hurried past him. But my mom caught it and frowned. "How does he know your name?" she asked. I had no answer. Maybe he overheard it when we checked in, I thought, but it still made my skin crawl. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard something outside the window. It was faint at first, like someone brushing against the bushes. Then there was a knock, soft and deliberate. I froze, staring at the curtains. Another knock. "Dad?" I called out. My dad came to the window, looked outside, and then opened the door to check. No one was there. "It's probably just an animal," he said, shutting the door and locking it. But I wasn't convinced. The next day, Jacob wasn't at his usual spot near the entrance. For the first time, I felt a small sense of relief. We spent the day in town and came back late, just before sunset. My dad parked the car, and we all headed to the room. As we approached, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. My dad tensed up, pushed the door open, and stepped inside cautiously. The room was empty, but someone had definitely been there. The bed I had been sleeping in was unmade, and my clothes, which I'd left neatly folded in my suitcase, were scattered on the floor. My dad went straight to the manager, furious. The manager was apologetic, said he'd look into it, but something about his reaction seemed off, like he was trying too hard to play dumb. "Jacob's been out all day running errands," he said. Couldn't have been him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the events of the day, every strange interaction with Jacob, every creepy look, every muttered word. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside the door. They stopped right in front of our room. Then, the knob rattled. "Dad!" I whispered loudly. He woke up and grabbed the baseball bat he always kept in the car. The footsteps moved away quickly, and when my dad opened the door, the hallway was empty. The next morning, we packed up and left a day early. My dad didn't even bother asking for a refund. As we were driving away, I glanced back and saw Jacob standing in the parking lot, watching us leave. He had something in his hand, something small and red. My heart dropped when I realized it was the scarf I'd been wearing the day we arrived. We didn't stop until we were hours away, safely back on the main highway. My dad swore off bargain motels after that, but to this day, I can't shake the memory of Jacob's eyes, following me everywhere I went, or the way he stood there holding that scarf, like he was daring me to come back for it. Thanks so much for listening to Nightmare Narratives. We hope you enjoyed these truly terrifying stories. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you'll know when we post new videos every Tuesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Central Time. If you have a scary story you'd like to hear read on the channel, email us at officialnightmarenarratives@gmail.com. and you might just hear your story in a future episode. Thanks again for listening, and stay spooky, friends. We'll catch you in the next one.